Well, the first major domino of the offseason has fallen for the Baltimore Orioles as they have made their decision on Jordan Lyles' 2023 team option, and they've declined it. $11 million. He will get a $1 million buyout. Lots of questions as the Orioles begin free agency in full tomorrow. Paul Mancano joined by my co-host Brendan Mortensen live on Facebook and YouTube to break down the news, Brendan, that Lyles had his $11 million team option declined for 2023. And we knew when he signed this contract a year ago, when it was for $7 million for 2022, that this was certainly a possibility, and now it comes to fruition.
Yeah, I think Jordan Lyles gave you pretty much exactly what you were hoping for out of that $7 million contract, and he kind of had to overperform a little bit to justify having that $11 million picked up for 2023. I don't think he's going to get that much per year on the open market, so we'll see what the Orioles decide to do with Jordan Lyles. Maybe they'll attempt to bring him back on a deal worth a little bit less than $11 million, but Lyles does not get that option for next year.
Now let's see what the Orioles had to say about it via Rock Kabako, releasing this statement that the Orioles will remain engaged with Jordan Lyles over the winter and wouldn't rule out a return, but at the early juncture of the offseason and the price point, preferred to decline his option. Now, Brendan, I think this begs the question of whether the Orioles will make another addition to their starting rotation as they head into next year with several major question marks, I think you could say, in that rotation. Other than you have Dean Kramer returning, you have Kyle Bradish, who certainly showed some promise last year, and you had some intriguing other guys like an Austin Voth or Spencer Watkins. Other than those 4 or 5, you really don't have too many sure things, and that might be where Mike Elias chooses to address the team needs, is in free agency and with a starting pitcher.
Yeah, if you wanted to look purely at some internal options, I think you could make a starting rotation of 5 guys that you're pretty happy with. You mentioned Dean Kramer and Kyle Bradish. I think those are the 2 absolute locks. I think there's 2 almost locks in Tyler Wells and Grayson Rodriguez, and then you can kind of make a conglomeration of who you want that number 5 starter to be, whether that's Austin Voth, who had an impressive 2022, whether that's DL Hall, who you want to get worked into that rotation. Mike Baumann, you could make a similar case for as well. But I would be surprised if the Orioles left this offseason without bringing in another veteran starting pitcher. We know John Means is going to be back halfway through the year, but if they don't bring in a veteran starter, then you don't really have that one guy in the rotation that you can look to and say, okay, he has a solid track record. He's got a lot of experience. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Orioles tried to go after Jordan Lyles again on a cheaper deal, or maybe by declining this $11 million option, they're opting to instead spend a little bit more money on maybe a higher tier of starting pitcher. Chris Bassett is a name that's gotten thrown out a lot, and just as an example, he might make somewhere in the 15 to 20 million a year range. So maybe the Orioles want to increase that payroll a little bit and get a higher caliber of starter to add the rotation.
And we knew what the Orioles liked about Jordan Lyles a year ago when they signed him to that contract was his ability to eat innings, and he certainly did that for the Orioles this year. 32 starts on the season, 179 innings pitched. That ERA wasn't terrible. It was a decrease compared to 2021 with Texas of 4.42. Strikeout numbers remain about steady of about 7 per 9. But Brendan, you mentioned some intriguing options. I know that there's a tier 1 of free agent starting pitcher out there, and it includes Justin Verlander and Carlos Rodon and Jacob deGrom. But there's also a very intriguing tier 2. And if you miss out on one of those top 3 guys, the tier below those 3 guys certainly has some intriguing options. But free agency is a minefield. There's no guarantee that anybody that you bring in will be able to fill Jordan Lyles' spot and perform productively. Stay healthy is another big thing. And frankly, Jordan Lyles did exactly what the Orioles were expecting of him, and they may not get that kind of sure thing out there on the free agent market if they choose to go away from Lyles.
Yeah, picking up this $11 million option for 2023 probably would have been the safe move for the Orioles, but they can't really afford to play things safe right now. They are trying to make a playoff push for the 2023 season. We saw last year that they are in a position to do that with their young core, and now you're trying to supplement with that young core with some quality veterans that you can find in free agency or via trades. You mentioned that tier 2 of starting pitchers. It's possible that the Orioles just get priced out of that tier. That seems to always happen in free agency as the Rodons and DeGroms get signed for mega millions. This tier 2 kind of gets overpriced a little bit, and teams reach on those starters because they can't get the tier 1 guys. So we'll see if the Orioles are able to get one of those tier 2 options. Some names: Chris Bassett, like I mentioned, Noah Syndergaard, Jamison Tyone, Nathan Eovaldi, just a few options that the Orioles could go after. But I wouldn't be surprised too if they went after a similar pitcher to Jordan Lyles, even if it's not Jordan Lyles. Names like Andrew Heaney, that's a possibility there as well. So it's kind of hard to say whether the Orioles will go after that top tier, but I think they'll certainly be active in the starting pitcher market.
Andrew Heaney, Tyler Anderson, Noah Syndergaard, several guys out there that might fit that kind of description of a free agent starting pitcher. We are live on Facebook and YouTube, and Katie on Facebook bringing up how Jordan Lyles fit the team very well. He added a lot as a veteran presence, and he really boosted the team chemistry. He fit in quite well from day one. I think of another free agent that the Orioles added last winter in Robinson Chirinos, who's going to be 38 next year. So there's certainly some age concerns there, and the Orioles probably unlikely to bring him back as a backup for Adley Rutschman. But when you are considering free agents, I think chemistry is an important thing here as well, because you do have so many young guys on this team, and ideally when you're signing a free agent who is 30 or older, you'd like to sign somebody who is willing to come in and be a mentor for a lot of these guys. Lyles did it this past year. Robinson Chirinos did it. Rougned Odor, who was another free agent addition. So while you certainly would like productivity on the field, I think team chemistry is an important factor to consider.
And obviously you'd like a mix of both, ideally, and you're probably going to have to spend a little bit more money to get that done. And you mentioned how important Jordan Lyles was for the starting pitching rotation last year. When John Means goes down early on in the season, needs Tommy John surgery, he was kind of the veteran guy that most of those younger starting pitchers were more than likely going to turn to for advice of how to handle a full big league season. Right now, in the absence of Jordan Lyles, the Orioles don't really have that in any starting pitcher. So I think they'll at least try to go after one veteran starter in free agency to at least have that presence in the clubhouse and be a leader for those starters.
Well, free agency really begins in earnest tomorrow as teams can begin negotiating with free agents all out there, not just the guys that are in-house like they were for their own free agents the last several days. So they can go out there, begin negotiations, and try to sign one of the starting pitchers that is out there on the free agent market. And we'll see if Mike Elias and company choose to do so. But the first big decision has been made as they decide to decline Jordan Lyles' $11 million option for 2023. Lyles will get his $1 million buyout, and he will hit the free agent market. And Mike Elias and company issuing a statement that open negotiations can continue with Lyles, but as of right now, his option for next year has been declined, and he is a free agent like the rest of them. Thanks so much to Brendan Mortensen, my co-host. You can also catch us both on the MASN All Access podcast, which is every Wednesday at 11 a.m. live in these same locations, Facebook and YouTube. Then you can watch it or listen to it after the fact on the MASN app, Spotify, SoundCloud, any of your favorite podcast platforms. You can catch the MASN All Access podcast. For my co-host Brendan, my producer Amy Jennings, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much.